It doesn't look like a lot, even though...
De documentaire? Hij staat sowieso... Leuk. Okay, well, welcome everyone here at the final presentations of Dirty Old Town at the Independent School for the City. The first edition of Dirty Old Town. So in a way, all of you have been kind of our experiment, our subject of experiment. And today we're going to see what kind of came out of this collective endeavor that we've gone through over the last 12 weeks. We have 7 participants that partly online, partly here in the school, followed a 12-week program on contemporary urbanism, with the idea that we aim to train critical urbanists, or urbanists in the broadest sense of the word. So everybody that wants to engage with the city and that uses the city as their kind of their research field of research. The last 12 weeks have been intense. We started with 2 weeks of introductions, getting to know the city, getting to know each other and the various people involved in the school. Afterwards, we worked on 3 thematic blocks. First 2 weeks on super diversity, meaning the extreme diversity within the population of Rotterdam in terms of background, education level, etc. We had a week in which we dived into the world of crime and the impact that it had on the city. Afterwards, 2 weeks on the Anthropocene, our impact on the world and on the Earth's systems. And afterwards, there was a period of 4 weeks during which each participant could develop its own project. And this is the final presentation of these projects. And at the same time, also the closing of this 12-week program. So I'm very happy that although the restrictions in terms of Corona, that still we managed to have some special guests here tonight. Well, I'm not going to introduce everyone. I see 2 housemates of Siiri, 2 friends, welcome. You're from Emilie's boyfriend, nice. Then we have Herman Kosman, Dirk Simons. For those who don't know the rest, there's Simone Rots in the back. Michelle Provoost, and Sascha Herfskens, our research. Well, today we're gonna follow a schedule of 7 presentations. Each presentation we kind of takes up 20 minutes. Then there's some time for discussions, response of 10 minutes, and afterwards. Well, after 4 presentations, we'll take a break, really short one. So it's a fully packed program. And then at 5, we hope to wrap up the whole event and have some drinks together. There's also a live stream of this presentation, so I'm not sure if there's people watching at home, but otherwise people will probably watch it afterwards. Also welcome to them. 12? Nice. Well, let's just start. The first speaker or the first presentation is being done by Alexandra Coutsoucos. Sorry. And I want to give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you. All right. Cool. Hi, everyone. It's been a hell of a ride, hasn't it? Today, I would like to present to you the project that I developed for the last couple of weeks. It's a board game, and it's called Anthropocity, and it's meant to help envisioning and debating different attitudes on the Anthropocene. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about why I decided to do a board game, and a little bit on how it works, and hopefully at the end we can play. So this was the state of mind that I had when the course was finished, when we finished all the lectures. I was a bit overwhelmed, and I was very confused, but also I started to become a lot more aware. It was a little bit like looking into a mirror when doing this course. I started to be a little bit more aware of myself as a designer. I started to be a little bit more aware of myself as a daughter of modernism, as a human, as part of human species, part of this planet, but not, let's say, the owner of this planet. And there were many topics that I found interesting. And I realized when I was having a conversation with a friend of mine we always agreed with everything. We were discussing about the future of the world and how sustainability is gonna help develop a better world for everyone. And that was the moment where we started to clash a little bit. And she had this very, let's say, solution-oriented and technology-focused way of looking at things. She said technology is gonna save us. We will even have a better life than we have now. We will be able to maintain the standards of our living. And through this course, I understood that we actually need to really change the way we approach life, what we call the city, and the dynamics that are in it. So I started to think that debating about these things really helps you to understand your position on subjects as important as these. So I started to wonder, how can I bring my friends, how can I bring my community and my colleagues in this conversation? And I think a lot of times, like, the problem with these debates are fact-based, they're notion-based, and it's very difficult to talk about such topics in a rational way. So I thought, how can I create a conversation platform in a sub-rational way, in an intuitive way, in a non-fact-based way? So I started to explore different entry points. I went from, okay, I'm going to invent a new religion, to I'm going to create some new city myths, to exploring all these mystical, a little bit occult, let's say, narratives, until I landed on the idea of tarots. Tarots are actually something that are part of me, because my mom reads tarots and I do tarots reading, you can believe it or not. But something that is interesting about tarot cards is that they are an image. They give a representation of human archetypes and behaviors and ways of thinking, as well as like natural elements in them. So here you can see the Fool, for example. The Fool is the card 0 of a deck of 21 cards. And as you can see, there's a young man that is picking up flowers, looking at the sky and walking carelessly, naively, maybe towards a cliff, maybe he's gonna turn back, and the Fool represents the incognito. So not knowing where you're heading and not caring about it in a positive or in a negative way. And then there's the High Priestess. The High Priestess is a controversial figure, a very spiritual figure. She's very maternal, and but also very mysterious. She's holding on her lap a book that is the book of wisdom and knowledge, that is everything, that it can be intended in the deepest sense, and it can be read through intuition more than intellect. And I feel like she is a figure that is more, let's say, more mysterious than, for example, the emperor. The emperor, in opposition to the priestess, is this very powerful figure. If you see, the number is 4. 4 are the sides of a square, and the square represents everything that is solid and finished. It's also an icon for the material side of things. And in fact, the emperor used to be the head of the army. So the emperor is this powerful figure that accomplishes things, and it can be a solution, a person, like an individual that brings long-lasting solutions in the positive and in the negative sense. So tarots don't express a judgment in that sense. And at time can be also despotic or just solution-oriented. While the star, one of the elements, let's say the natural elements in the tarots, you can see Venus in the center that is bathing herself in the water. That is the gift that she brings to Earth. She bathes herself, she bathes the water, she bathes the Earth, and from Earth there's nature sprouts. And the star, of course, is representing the direction, the destiny. Like sailors used to look at the stars to find direction. I'm not sure if you see where I'm going here. But what I noticed is that in some of the cards, they resemble the philosophies and the attitudes of the Anthropocene, like towards the Anthropocene. They were explained by Hamilton and endorsed by Dirk. So I thought, if tarots help people feeling connected to certain attitudes and towards certain behaviors, how can I use them to help my friends, to help my community, to help people identify with different attitudes towards the Anthropocene? And this is how Anthropocity was born. So the idea is Anthropocity is a board game. It's a board game that you can play between 4 and 6 people, hopefully in the future even more, where basically each player picks a role, and with this role they embody an ideology or a philosophy, and with this philosophy they're all part of this city. They're all part of this neighborhood, this city. And as part of it, they need to implement some projects that they think are gonna improve the city. But the thing is, like, what better is for each one of these characters is different. So they're gonna have to debate, they're gonna have to endorse each other, they're gonna have to protest. So I was looking to develop a game that was indeed debate-oriented, that had simple dynamics, also because in 4 weeks, you can imagine. It was light on strategy because I really wanted it to be, about discussing. It would have this like role play and narrative elements. They would be approachable for everyone, and that it would have a purposeful competition. So let's dive into it a little bit. Of course, explaining a game is never as fun as actually playing it, so sorry for that. But basically, this is how it works. You pick a role, as I said, and to enter a little bit in the role, you spend the first 5 minutes drawing your house so that you can envision a little bit, where does your character live? What are the characteristics of the place? Do they live in nature? Do they live in a palace? And then you get to pick projects that you think best suit your character, and you can also create your own. The projects have resources, and the resources are in common for everyone. So you have to be careful if you want to allow someone else to build their projects. Yeah, and or if you want to use them yourself. And then there's different actions that can be performed. Of course, you can start a project and debate at all times. And you can endorse and protest the projects of others when you draw the card. There's an element of risk, or let's say of something that it cannot be determined, that is the people. So also the people, of course, live in the city. And the people can, let's say, support your protest or not, based on the rolling of the dice. So you will actually not know until you roll the dice. So this is a little bit of an explanation of the roles. I decided to expand the four, let's say, ideologies. And here are placed from, let's say, the most nature-oriented figure to the most materialistic and capitalistic, let's say, side. We have the priestess. She thinks that earth and nature are an active force that will ultimately define the success or fail of humans as a species. There's the gardener, who thinks that humans are not above but equal to all living species. So they dedicate their energy to non-human forms of life. There's the healer. Healer thinks that humans are colonizing the future, and we're thinking for Earth rather than with Earth. So not everything that is technologically possible could and should be allowed to happen. There is the maker, that is a very resourceful and optimistic being who really believes in that to every problem there's a solution. There's a man-made solution. There is the fool, who thinks there is nothing that they can do. If things really get bad, someone else will save them. And then, of course, there is the chairman, who really holds his lifestyle as part of his identity, and he thinks that if everyone worked hard enough, they'd get where he got. So this is a little bit how they're placed. Maybe in the future there could be even more. So we find the chairman and the fool, of course, in the nihilist side. The maker, it's fully in the eco-modernist. The healer, anthropocentrism 2.0. Gardeners and priestess, of course, post-humanist. And then there are the projects. I'm not going to dive too in deep with it, but the idea is that to every project there's resources. We go from the gold field to the soil regeneration, from the embassy of rivers to water dikes and greenhouses. And the idea is that every role picks up to 2 or 3 and hopefully more projects, and they have to argue for them. I've already mentioned the actions, so you can start a project, debate, endorse, and protest. So the winners are who has most projects on the board, and the game ends when the resources are finished, and when the spots on the boards for the projects are finished. So I actually got the chance to test this, which I have to admit was a lot of fun. So I gathered a few of my closest friends, and I sat them down, and we started the... Does this work? So this is how it went. You can see them drawing their cards, eating and drinking, of course. It's not a board game if you don't offer food. And then, of course, the game went on for an hour or so. And here you can see them like reading into their roles and drawing their houses and placing them on the board, picking their projects, and even developing their own projects to which we assigned resources on the spot. And of course, there was a lot of like Italian type discussing, so that was a lot of fun. So what I learned from testing it was that the role play works really well, and it was actually an element of fun. What was interesting, I think the mechanics of the game needs to improve in order to have like proper debates, but what was interesting was the argumentations that my friends used to place the projects on the board, which I thought was also an interesting outcome. And also the paradoxical combinations that came out where the ecomodernist, the maker partnered up with the priestess around the rivers between making dikes and advocating for the fish, you know, so that was really interesting. And of course, it was a lot of fun. Well, feedback on mechanics, yeah, so maybe an idea of, let's say, making the projects also giving resources rather than only taking resources. Relating project benefits to pre-existing conditions of the city. So maybe the city has already some conditions to which the projects add or take away. An idea would be to also maybe, let's say, link projects together and see what type of compatibility they can have, and look for an extra twist that makes it exciting to play multiple times. Of course, more projects, different types of dynamics. On content, I think it can be even more polarizing, both in the roles and in the projects. I started with very nuanced projects, but I understood that something that is stronger, like that is debatable today, it's even more important. And of course, defining more in detail the scoring, but that will come. So what's next? I've been in touch with these two wonderful people from Milan who are board game developers, and yeah, they asked me to move forward with this, and hopefully we're gonna publish it in December. So next up is yeah, next up is a manual, is writing the manual and fixing the game. So that's it. Cool. Thank you very much. This is it.
Nice. Thank you.
I'm glad.
Maybe some.
Yeah, if you have questions, I was already going. Please, anything.
Yeah, Alexandra, thank you indeed. This is a great way of making it, let's say, intersubjective with other people, etc., etc. And I was quite impressed how the, let's say, you as a casting director directed the title cards to the 4 positions, indeed. And I was thinking, I don't know tarot, but I know as a former hippie, the I Ching, which I think works a little bit the same
Similar,
way.
yeah.
But it starts with a question.
Yeah, it does.
And I think with tarot, it starts with a question too.
Tarots as well, yes.
Is that included in the game itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, not per se. I was looking for a topic of debate, and I think I found that in the projects. So I did not include the idea of a question. That's actually really interesting. Yeah, because what I wanted to do was really finding a way for people to impersonate and to identify. So also in, I'm not sure if it goes, no, what do you do? Can I go back? No, well, in the, to the slide with the roles maybe? Yes, please. So also the ways that I try to render the roles are in a way that we can all feel related to them. Yeah. So that was quite difficult also because, of course, I mean, the tarots are something else. I just took some elements of these cards and I enhanced them and modified them. So the use of the tarots that I made was this, identifying and relating. That's
yeah. And I think, like I said, you as a casting director, it's very impressive how these type of fall into place, literally. And I very much like the fool, not being the somber nihilist, but sort of complete careless person. blissfully
Yeah.
aware in a way. That is, of course, the positive side of that position. No worry in the world.
Yeah, I think many people of my generation can identify with that.
Yeah.
I would.
Of any generation.
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe not the next generation.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I want to say compliments because I think it's really, it turned out really interesting. We talked so much in advance about how to make this game. If you would have a board game or you have this, well, I showed you all these examples, but they all have huge negative sides, the existing models, because they want too much actually, and they pretend to do things that they cannot. But this is exactly performing in the way that it should. I think as a way of debate, not making. I like the way you composed it, the serious side and the debate side, which is the most important. It's the core of the project, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I like it very much because we need a lot of time to go into these topics. No, we're just discussing maybe we can make it much larger.
Yeah.
And that you are that we play it in real time, in person or something. Because that's always the problem, that you need at least a few days or a week to go into the topic. And just say after 1 hour of playing, everybody understands what's. Yeah.
No, I think the game was understood right away. It took an hour to start and to finish.
The 4 positions and the discussion.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's also a way, we're always discussing how to organize in a very, very short time, that you have a group of people they understand the topic, because that's the problem. How to communicate. I think this is a very nice way to communicate.
I see.
Maybe, I don't know, we can enlarge it to make it sort of. So maybe you can ask your game guys, maybe we can make also a huge version out of it.
Definitely.
Sort of twister, try to get into the.
Yeah, cool.
Now, I think it's important to find ways, which is not only by presenting in PowerPoints and other ways to get into this stories.
Thanks. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess if there's.
Yeah, I was playing.
Oh yeah. Whenever you want. It's there.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll continue with the next presentation by Blise Orr.
Oh, hold on. Please. This needs to happen. But I also. I need to spray it. Okay. So
If you want, you can take a few minutes.
Oh yeah. I'm looking at Market Hall, but Market Hall in terms of the archaeological site that lies underneath. So my research kind of started from forwards. I was looking at the market outside and trying to compare it and contrast it to the market on the inside. Just trying to understand what would make the spaces different and what values each space has, the inside one and the outside one, and how these have changed over time. And then, yeah, so some of the main takeaways from being on the inside is you kind of have this new take on like the traditions of food and the concept of like buying and trading on stalls and stands inside, and how people kind of like
have different takes on like what cuisine can be and where it can come from, and then you kind of see outside it's just this big market stall and you can kind of do and choose whatever you like. So this kind of came to these kind of like plastic looking artifacts on the inside, whereas outside it felt like a much more fresher and much more open. And then I kind of got to talking about the building itself, and kind of like what the future of this building could be, because a lot of the projects we've been looking at is kind of speculating on the future of urban sites, especially based in Rotterdam. So I kind of chose this one and decided to kind of speculate on what the future of that could be. So right now I kind of took a series of photographs. So this is kind of the empty market halls. And then this kind of led me to think, what is going to happen on the inside after COVID? This has very much been exaggerated by COVID, but I think prior to this there's been a lot of articles and things published about Market Hall which show it was kind of going this way anyway. So to me what was really interesting is just showing how this kind of like capitalist space on the inside was really empty and stagnant, whereas the one on the outside was still quite flourishing. And then I came to the kind of, I think just exploring the city as someone not from the city, I found this building super interesting, but also kind of, as I read into it, realised how popular it was and how much had been written about it. But then the one thing that kind of took me back was kind of going into this car park space and seeing this kind of like historic artifacts all just kind of laying beside the cars, and people passing and not really realising and not noticing like how important this stuff is to the society that we have just now. So basically, I don't know if most people might have been, or you might have passed and not noticed, but there's all these like very rare, one-of-a-kind objects that are really important to how society presents itself today. But it's also in this like really stark contrast to this car park. But I think the thing with Rotterdam and many underground spaces is they have to kind of generate a certain amount of income. So the car park, I guess, makes sense because people are paying to park there, and then the space kind of pays for itself. But the other interesting thing, I think, from the course that I learned about Rotterdam is the fact that because it's built on the water, there's only so much you can go under. So like in Sweden, Helsinki, and even Scotland, we have like cities under the ground already. So there's this whole kind of like archaeological underground, I guess. We want to say subculture, but that's not the right word. There's just this other world waiting to be discovered underneath. And then, yeah, so just taking these images and kind of seeing like this super, does this have a pointer? No. This super stark contrast between like, it's literally a shopping center, and then it's kind of like, okay, we can, what can we do with these objects that we found here? We can display them. It almost acts as a museum or an archive, but as soon as you put it beside this like car park, it just has this completely different take on society in general. And my aim for the project was kind of to get people to stop and kind of think about what they actually see and what they pass, and kind of make the invisible a bit more visible, whilst kind of raising the importance of like how valuable these artifacts can be. And then I was kind of just in disbelief at how like special some of the objects are as well. And they're all just like located underground, not really showing off. And again, so what I did was I made some drawings to kind of speculate on what could happen to the market hall in the future. Kind of looking at this big archway and kind of thinking about the negative space that lies below it, and how I guess we could think about that in terms of the city itself, and even making contrasts between other cities. So I just kind of came up with some fast, quick ideas, but just to really get people to look at the site and think about it as more than an archway. So for me, I thought it was quite important to kind of show like all of this rich landscape that's underneath, but also to show how the water could kind of act if someone was to redevelop the site. So here we have, I kind of imagined that these could be tunnels. One could act as like a gallery, and you could enter through the market hall building, and then you can walk along and just kind of like look at either just the dirt itself to kind of realize like and literally ground people, or to have objects placed in the bottom. And then also have a water feature, but also have a place that's open on the top where people can kind of look into in kind of another gallery space. But it's not so much about the fact that I've redesigned an exhibition or redesigned a gallery, it's more just to get people to stop and kind of think, oh, wait, we have all these crazy objects that are just lying around us and they're actually really important. And what can happen if we stop just kind of like building to create capital and look at the things that are kind of already there. So yeah, it's not to say that we should turn Market Hall into a gallery or an exhibition space, because I'm sure that might happen at some point, but it's more just to get people to kind of reconnect with these spaces that are kind of just used really quickly, especially this site because it's in the middle of town. So it's really interesting to kind of look at somewhere that people just pass through or pass around because they don't want to go through, and think about how you can like reimagine the landscape. Again, upstairs, just to have like continue the idea of having a market, but keep it open, remove the glass, and just allow people to pass through and be a bit more bewildered with the shape and the interactions that they have in between. And then in the basement, there's an idea that you can go down and you can dig for objects or different things that you'd be found, even if it's just like a tiny little bit of clay. So there could be archaeologists on site and helping people and just sharing the knowledge that they have, as well as having this water feature that could come up from below. Because obviously, the deeper you dig, the more chance you're going to hit water. So yeah, to just encourage this rather than kind of build upon it and be removed. And something also that Walter actually said was really interesting, when they build something here, there's always archaeologists on site, because the land is so like constantly being turned over that they always find stuff. So I just thought that was something that was really interesting to have kind of like architecture working with archaeologists, as well as they're like building new cities. It's super interesting to see the remnants of one in the past. And then this, to kind of an idea of what could happen in the levels, you could have entrances to tunnels that pass under the land, kind of like they have the subway stations in Helsinki and Sweden, but more as just to kind of like integrate people into the landscape, as well as having a viewing point, and then an auction place where you can go and you can bid on the little fragments that you would find in the dig site, just to kind of make it a bit more accessible and enabling everyone to kind of have something. So they could start super low, just for like a little fragment, almost like a souvenir, but less commercial, I guess. And then on top, kind of have these kind of relics of the market hall and using them as exhibition stands, just to showcase objects that have been found. And then this is just kind of like a visual to show like how the underlayer could be used. You could have the viewpoint at the top that's enabling people to just look in and kind of be a bit more bewildered with what's below, whereas right now it's just a car park. And then my action. I really wanted to show this to people, but I didn't know how to, and I wanted it to be more than just like a quick architectural drawing. So I made a pamphlet and handed it out outside Market Hall, engaging with people and talking to them. But again, just to kind of like build this vision in your head of someone's looking at something, they see Market Hall not as Market Hall is or should be, or people are using it just now, but they think, oh wait, there's this whole landscape below, and right now it's just a car park. So yeah, the idea was just to get people to look at the space differently, and I think what's quite powerful about this is, in comparison to the drawings, you only see the top part, whereas with this, you can imagine that the people are looking at the pamphlet and thinking about all the space below. And I think that, for me, was kind of like powerful enough. Yeah, just to kind of imagine that someone else is thinking along similar lines to the way that I'd been thinking through the course. But yeah. Oh yeah, how do I do it? But yeah, I was just working with a 3D model, just to really play with the space and see how much we could play with this like really interesting building, but also this very much like why building. Yeah, I think something that I also tend to do is just kind of take a building that already exists and kind of really interrogate everything that goes on inside. But the overarching idea is just to really make people think, what else could this be if we had 4 weeks, 3 weeks, however long to research this one building. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or remarks?
That's funny. The exhibition downstairs, I made it. I did it in a hurry. I mean, to understand, I mean, this is for Rotterdam a really important place because this is the oldest spot. And this is the dam in Rotterdam.
Yeah, I should have showed the pamphlet. The pamphlet kind of explains that and enables the people to understand like the history and then the things that are happening just now and kind of like what could be. Yeah. No, but the exhibition itself is great. It's just in beside the car park.
I mean, the idea was, of course, which is nice that you have that you go. So deep into the ground that you try to show what you're going to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the car park also has the kind of like wall that really makes you feel like you're underground. When I went,
we made all these colored layers just to feel that you're underground.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of discussions with these car park owners. They didn't like it at all because it was not commercial enough.
Yeah.
On the end we want.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but it's nice that you on the end make it much bigger than we have just these few showcases.
Yeah, I mean that's the ideal. The exhibition is great, but if it was overtaking the car park, great.
I must say, I really like how you sort of turned epicenter of consumerism in Rotterdam into, well, sort of envisioning what it might be to have a city without shops. And
I mean, you can still buy things.
well, I would strongly advise you not to have anything for sale.
Yeah.
Completely there. But there's one thing I miss, and it might be, let's say, top layer. Because we all think archaeology is the highlight is when you find a Roman vase or something like that. But the top meter is, of course, it is bombing rubble from 1940. It is sort of the relics of consuming plastics, etc., etc. So the top layer that a real archaeologist would not find very interesting, I think would be extremely interesting for this new archaeology theme park.
And the Anthropocene layer.
Yeah, the Anthropocene layer. Yeah.
It's funny enough, you can't look with other eyes anymore to this building.
Yeah, and I think
it starts to become a sort of like museum.
that kind of became the aim. Like as soon as I did this, like yesterday, I was like, even if I'm not 100%, like it's not a design, it's more just like a, it's an action. It's kind of like we were saying about the whole workshop has been like stories, research, strategies, and action. Like as soon as you do this and you have the kind of like one drawing to kind of show people, go like, oh yeah, like this doesn't stop at the ground level, like this could go under. And I think that's something that's been really great about the course.
But in a way, it resembles a giant sarcophage. And it's a sort of Egyptian grave to be opened by anybody entering through these doors. So
Yeah.
he's not dead yet, but the mummy of Ivo Opstel. Something like that.
Cool.
How did people respond on the pamphlet? Because I like that you kind of try to bring this information also to people on site.
Yeah, I think people are like, this is cool. Like, oh, it's cool. Just the way people react to design, or the people react to kind of like a drawing or something. And they say, oh, where do you study at the Kuhn Academy? And you're like, no. But yeah, just, I guess, somewhat super interesting. And also I could have gone on market day, but I'm really glad that I didn't. Because I think just having I also could have photoshopped the people, and the more I looked at the pictures, the more I was like, oh, this just looks like it's photoshopped. But yeah, no, I guess like having the reactions is super important. Yeah.
I think it really worked out well. You're looking for all these other functions, and now it's become this statement of a really monumental sort of Egyptian building that has been made to become a ruin, it almost looks like. And after commercialism. So yeah, I think it really falls in place.
Because I think the whole time I was like, I don't want to, that doesn't need to be an exhibition, it doesn't need to be something that someone's already could design or like whatever, but I guess just kind of doing it and then being like, it's not about that, it's just about making people think a little bit differently.
Also this do-it-yourself archaeology, I think could be very contagious. Like everyone taking shovels and just starting digging and just, nice.
Very nice, yes.
But there's something utopian also about it, there's this tradition, especially with 18th century architects, 19th century architects, that there was this one painter in England who was, I can't remember his name now, but he was, his specialism was to paint buildings that were just being built right then, like the Bank of England, for example, to paint them as if they were already ruins. So it's to project yourself forward into the future and then to imagine. And this was not done as a kind of provocative statement. He was actually commissioned to do that by the architect, by John Soane, who was the architect of the Bank of England, because the sign of a good architecture is that it will become a beautiful ruin. So what is his name? With Sam Jacob, we made an exhibition in Venice, and we used one of his paintings. But there's this same idea in it, that this building, that you could see it on one level as a critical statement on consumerism and this building. On the other hand, you could say we are helping Rotterdam and NVRDV, who designed it, to transcend into the real, the Valhalla of architecture, which is when you have become a beautiful ruin. And the same goes, of course, for Rotterdam as a city, that you finally start looking at yourself as a ruin, as a beautiful ruin.
And as an inspiration, there is a study of Paris without Les Grandes Magasins. So just before, let's say, the court culture made consumerism emerging to these large magazines on the boulevards and avenues. There was a Paris almost without shops.
Yeah.
We see it's incredible. Paris without shops. And only in the small streets, and there were of course, craftsmen and small grocery shops, etc., but there was not yet that culture of enormous magazines. So, if we are traveling to the future via the past, there might be a point in Rotterdam where you have a city without shops, which would be rather dull.
Well, that's what everybody seems to find the biggest drama can't go shopping.
Yeah.
And if you just get, that is what people forget about the deaths and the no schools, etc. People don't care.
That's the
But
worst.
no shopping. That's the thing.
Well, thank you so much. We'll continue with Jonas Althaus with bird gaze. Do you want to take it? All right. Yeah, really exciting to be at this point after all these very interesting weeks of exploring the city through different facets. And yeah, we already mentioned we learned so much about the different layers that built the city, the super diversity in the city, about crime, about dikes, about water, and last but not least about how to wake up in the Anthropocene and the anthropocentric city. And that's also was for me very nice to see then looking back at the topics before, because we could kind of with this question of what does it mean to live in the age of human, what does it mean to talk about crime, to talk about super diversity. And yeah, with Herman and Dirk, we did some workshops about what if, and we explored different relations to our position as humans in the world, other outlooks of dealing with resources. But I realized that still in the projects that we did together, in the discussions we had among, we were creating scenarios for humans. We were thinking about human lives, maybe also in relation to animals or other non-humans. But the point of view was a human-centric one, which makes perfectly sense in the age of Anthropocene. And but in my project that I started a few weeks ago, I asked myself, what does the city mean? What is the city to non-humans? Because this is not only the kind of epicenter of human creations where our lifestyles are kind of bringing forth huge production chains, but it's also home to a lot of other beings. And before this Waking Up in the Anthropocene course, maybe when I looked at a pigeon at the station, I would think, that's really a pitiful, sick pigeon. What is it even doing here? It should be in the nature, right? It should be on a tree somewhere. It would probably do much better. But then through this course also, I started to think, why am I actually trying to explain it that way? Why do I try to describe the city as something unnatural and a tree as something natural? Yeah, and there's a lot of nature in the city, and there are a lot of very, very interesting projects that are dealing with that. Doorbells for fishes, or through my research, I also found out that there are projects of creating bird sounds in order to help swarms of birds to settle from one part of the city to the other. Very, very interesting approaches. But what I want to get at is that I think it's also very important to think about how we think about the city. What is the narrative? Is it, can it always stay a human narrative, or can we also try to
understand what the city is to non-humans. And of course, that's in part in vain, because can we really understand how a pigeon feels? At the same time, I think we should try. And I tried a bit too much. I had interviews with swans, with coots. Even I wanted to know how the river feels about this city. And I think still it's a very, very interesting perspective, but it got a bit out of hand. So I focused on birds, on 2 birds at the end of the day. And what I am doing is I want to give a tour, a stroll through town, visiting human places, but to offer an interpretation, of course, of a non-human perspective. So people could really tune into this bird gaze on the city. And yeah, it's my approach, my attempt to create a different narrative, different narratives, to offer them, to put them out there for people to explore them in their habitat, in the habitat of other beings as well. And at the time being, there will be, because I only managed to render these experiences this morning, there will be 4 different access points where you can access with your mobile phone and with headphones a kind of spherical, 3-dimensional acoustic impression, visual acoustic impression. And that's basically what you will experience very soon. I'm sad that I couldn't test it in the city yet, but I'm very glad that I have such an incredible audience, incredible guinea pigs for my bird gaze experiment. And before you start to scan, I would like to ask you, because this is a bit of a faked setup, right? We are not in the city at the moment, so I would like to ask you to put on headphones before you scan, because the video will start immediately. But also, I would actually advise or recommend that if you feel you don't have enough space around you, to look a bit, where you can find it. It's what I think would work. There are not 4 videos. It felt like I made a lot more during the last days, but it's only 3. Open the playlist via this capture. Portrait view, full screen, please. If you don't have headphones, I have a couple of them there. If something doesn't work, I can come and help you. I can also offer my phone in case somebody misses one. And this will take approximately, 15 minutes, no, 10 minutes, I guess.
The link is in the YouTube stream for those.
Yes,
who are
yes. For those who are watching remotely, the link is in the stream.
So how do we start? We first scan this?
Yeah, please scan it.
Wait, I'm almost there.
All right, great. Oh yeah, okay. Yes, please. Yeah. Anybody needs headphones?
There. Gewoon scannen. Met je foto volgen.
Oh yeah, you have a very special phone. I have a Bluetooth as well. If you want to carry.
Zit er gelijk in.
Heb je nummers?
Yeah. New full screen. Go. Yeah. Okay. Well, pottery. It's supposed to be like this. Yes. Okay. I'm putting it into pairing mode. Now it's ready to pair. If you want, I can find it for you. Do you have the YouTube actually? If you open it, I can find it also for you on that. You have headphones, huh? Yeah. Okay. So this is the playlist, and this is the first reading. Okay. Yeah, it's not. Thanks. Sure.
See that.
Close. I have two people from Fiverr that did it, but I work with them often. So, and the other one is my girlfriend. Yeah.
stemmen we ook wel echt anders zijn.
Ja.
Nee, denk ik. Maar dat is zijn werk, dat bestaan niet. Ja, dat bestaat volgens mij wel echt. Ja.
Nee, dat is niet.
Are you going to place those PORs in the city?
Yes, that's the idea, yeah. I'm waiting for the last humans to come back to our human meeting.
I can't wait to see it in this book.
Yeah.
Which building did you go up?
Thank you.
It's actually the Marriott Hotel.
You really much have to do
Yeah, so it's it's famous for humans. Yeah, I went up to the rooftop bar, or not really rooftop, but.
I think it was.
Yeah.
It was the same picture.
Dirk is still in conversation.
Conversation with the poem.
Yeah.
Did you write the poem about the starling?
Yes, I did.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What a treat.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy that you could all see it because I wasn't sure. There's always technology in the way, but thanks a lot for bearing with it. And yeah, I mean, I only scratched the surface. Should we wait? Sorry. Okay. I only scratched the surface of all the very fascinating stories I tapped into in the research I did. I have to say that it was so far really missing the expertise of ecologists or people that know more about the very intricate relations that are at stake in the city with non-humans and humans. But nonetheless, I felt it's a good moment to explore a format that hopefully can help to engage a broader public, to these kind of questions. And that's it.
It's
Yeah.
about the format, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, all this, you could stuff it as full with there's endless amounts of knowledge about ornithology.
Yeah.
But of course, the format or the work that you made, that's what I find interesting is that you use two such different literary formats.
Yeah.
The first one was like this kind of nearly comedic dialogue, and then the second one, this beautiful musical poem. And that the two formats are so very typecast to the birds, these kind of transcendent beings of the starlings, and then these kind of muttering, quarreling pigeons. I thought, if you, that and also visual rhythm and color that befits each bird, and I think that's where the real work lies. Not so the ornithology is that's just material, that's what you work with. But the real what I really like is the translation into these forms.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's a starting point. If you go really deeper, if you really go see, whether they smell.
Yeah. Yeah.
They smell much more.
Where did you get the posh speaking English bird?
He's
In the school.
he's a professional voice actor who's offering his services online. But it's not the first time that I work with him. He also impersonated an attorney in a court scenario, and yeah, they're great collaborators you can find online. So, but yeah, it's really like it's but it's also actually this process is also kind of, you realize quickly, like I had also a professional interpreter for the poem.
Yes.
But it's so easy. No, like that was my girlfriend, by the way. But the professional, thanks. The professional was very easily making it so much that it was very cheesy. So that's also in the format, of course. Interestingly, to see how far can we go in trying to anthropomorphize, you know what I mean. And what can it still tell us, right? I mean, that should be the bottom line. Yeah.
Fantastic, really fantastic trick. And it reminds me that technique is the best way to get in contact with nature.
Yeah, we need something to.
Yeah, sort of interface between us and nature. Technique is it can't be beat. And I was when I was looking around at the swarm of the starlings, I was thinking I would like to be one of the starlings in the swarm and then have the experience
That's true. So if you are
going with the swarm, etc. So that would be a suggestion for the next.
Yeah, I think kind of different ways of embodying these views, of course. At the same time, I mean, it's also then interesting to take again the human scale and to look up to. The mix was important for me.
But that's
the
why
simple thing of having a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's such a strong effect. If you're really low or really high, of course our city is you never think of those different viewpoints. Even though a lot of also people, like children, see it that way. Dogs. It's a very powerful effect to see the city different.
Do you know this book, Being Beast?
Being Beast?
Being Beast. That's an English journalist, and he starts just to understand what it is to be a fox or some dust in English. Badger. So he lived there for a month or something with his son, just on another island to smell, to try to understand. Totally other connection to nature. Nothing that could be also part of it.
True.
How did you make this fantastic swarm, Jonas? It's really
I cannot tell all my tricks. No, it's a real swarm. I didn't make it. It's just placed.
It's nature here.
It is nature, yeah. It's integrated into the experience with an overlay. But
What is interesting about the poem, I thought, and also maybe the way that it was read, was that it kind of hovers between, is this the point of view of one single bird, like the one that Dirk wishes to be, or is it the point of view of the swarm as so who is the individual here? Is it the bird or is it the swarm? And I thought that was, and I can imagine that if you have it read by a professional actor, then it would become too much like the individual bird, because it would become heavier and more individualistic, and now it kind of remained ambiguous what we were hearing. Right? thought that was really. So it's about these really small things, and that's the. And in the meantime, you manage to get in. You still manage to get in this strange knowledge. Well, I find you already told us that, by the way, the one that the toes of the pigeons, that the ones who get nearby us are the ones who have lost their toes, and therefore they have to take more risks and come closer to humans. So we get a kind of a twisted image of. We think that all the pigeons.
Yeah, of course there's, it's sometimes really also difficult to face this reality that the city that kind of allows for existence of non-humans also provides misery, of course. So there's this, and I think it was important to integrate these stories as well.
But do you think that it is necessary to integrate this back into the city?
Yeah, I think it can be an interesting experience to have the, not necessarily in the moment that you're taking it in, because if you're sheltering yourself off with a screen, and it was more that in the process of taking these pictures, I realized it's nice to take it in and then to walk back to where I was starting from and to suddenly look around and see it differently. So the stroll is maybe a component I believe in. Yeah. Or what do you have in mind?
Well, I think it works very well as an autonomous experience too. Like inside, safely inside, it works too. But I can imagine that.
Being out,
the feedback loop. Reality.
Excuse me?
The next step would be augmented reality.
Yeah.
You do it outside.
I'm thinking about it. I have some very talented friends that could help me on that part. So far I can get by myself. I would really like to continue in this format, explore it more, see what's possible.
And that laser thing, is that true?
It's true.
Really?
It was in 2016. It's a bit fake because it's not there anymore. But the poster you saw is original, and the reasoning is a quote from an Spoorweg and the bird control group, whatever that's supposed to be.
But who ever got bothered by those birds?
Probably
you ever travel by
train stations.
They get attacked by pigeons.
Yeah, but talking about that,
people that bother me, public transport, they should have something against that.
I wonder if you also noticed that in Koolsingel, where the birds try to land, I found out that there used to be large swarms of starlings that like to sit there during the night, so much that the city decided to do something against it eventually. That is to put little lights in the trees to make it brighter and to even replace larger trees with smaller ones. So,
I always thought that was just to make things more beautiful. So it's hostile architecture.
You can look at it in different ways, I guess, but yeah. It's also beautiful. Beautiful to not slip with your bike on the fietspad because of the. Anyways, thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll continue with Anaïs, and afterwards we'll take a small break. continue.
So what you're holding in your hands is a newspaper article from the future, from 2041 to be more precise. So I use this speculative news story to, as a way to imagine a possible post-capitalist future for the city. So it's also, of course, a way of communicating this possible future. It's talking about the transformations that happened in the previous 20 years. So how we got to this new post-capitalist context. I will try to convey some of the content from the text in presentation form by showing some excerpts from it and giving you a bit of an overview of the story. So I will start by explaining a little bit about this new socio-political context that we're in 2041, and then so the way I approached this was starting from some existing political ideas and experiments, and focusing more specifically on 3 different current issues that I wanted to address. And these 3 different current issues correspond to 3 projects in this future scenario. So as ways to address them, think about the ways they could be addressed in this slightly utopian but not so distant future. What happened in the last 20 years, in the 2020s and 2030s. What happened is that there's been a strong increase in automation in a lot of the different economic sectors, especially after the COVID-19 crisis. So this led to a rise in unemployment, also rising inequalities, wealth inequalities, and leading to a lot of social unrest in different parts of the world. And so a few governments, in the late 2020s, a few governments started experimenting with basic income programs as a way to try and keep the situation under control, including the Netherlands. That was one of the first ones to implement that. So in the Netherlands, also next to this, the implementation of basic income programs, because also as a result of increased automation, some parts of, so this had also an effect on the urban landscape, with some parts of the city centers, specifically the business districts becoming more and more deserted. And so to tackle that problem, in the Netherlands, the government started implementing some quite ambitious measures that would encourage the reuse of these vacant buildings by community projects. So this is what leads us to Weena, which is here around the corner, and which is a great example of one of these business districts that were mostly deserted in the late 2020s. And where some community-based organizations were able to invest these vacant buildings and reuse them with some innovative programs. So the first one of these 3 projects or 3 organizations that I'm describing in the article is called the Multi-Lever Open Cooperative. It's housed in the former Unilever headquarters. And it is a group of small independent entities that are each focusing on a specific, on the production of a specific type of product or service. They all have varying degrees of, varying types of internal organization, varying degrees of hierarchies. Some are just workshops where artists or makers share resources, share their knowledge, and others are much more organized and rule-based organization that have a collective production. So all these smaller organizations together form the multi-level cooperative, and they manage the building. They also organize events, and any benefits that they make is reinvested into an ambitious impact program that helps the people who fall outside of the UBI program. So the issues that this project is addressing, the current issues that this project is addressing, well, current or not so current, but is basically, so what are the alternatives that we can imagine in a post-work scenario to the social structure that we are getting today from the professional world? So once there are no more bullshit jobs, what do we do all day, and how do we find purpose? So because this is a nuanced utopia, some experiments can go wrong, and as you will see when you read the article, multi-level actually turns out to not really be this egalitarian and inclusive organization that it pretends to be. I'm not going to spoil everything, so I hope you will read the article. The second project is located across the street in the former W200 office building. It's called SANA, and it's an organization that centers on care. It calls itself a temple of care. So what they are trying to address here is how care work or social reproduction can fit within this new UBI-based society. Because so UBI could be seen as a form of wage for housework, which is what the second wave feminists were demanding in the 60s and 70s, but it could also reinforce the invisibility of work that is already unwaged now. So domestic work, for example, work that is often done by women, and so it could also just maintain the current gender divisions of labor. So these are one of the things that this project is trying to address. It's split into 3 different programs. The first one is cooperative daycare center located on the ground floor of the building, where childcare is seen not merely as a service anymore, but as more of as a collective parenting endeavor. So in this childcare center, the parents work themselves with the children. So they are all collaborating on each other's parenting and childcare. The second program of SANA is a co-living project, which is occupying 6 of the building's typical floors. So in this project, we have it's offering space for new types of households, which are each occupying one of these floor plates, which are about 450 square meters. And so what Sana relies on also a lot is the use of open source digital platforms. So for example, in this co-living project, these platforms are used to negotiate living spaces and also manage accountability between the members. The platform's algorithms are also used to match potential household members together. And then the third part of the program, which occupies 2 floors of the building, is it provides space for some more specifically care-related practices, so non-medical practices. Like, for example, doulas, which are people who offer emotional support to people who go through health-related significant life experiences, like pregnancy or death, for example. The other example of a type of practices who is occupying this space is cuddle therapy specialists, which is a profession that emerged in the 2010s and luckily has become much less commodified lately. So Sana is providing space for that as well, for example. As you will see also in the article, not everything goes smoothly with Sana either. But I will not say more about it right now. And then the third project is called Terra Weena, and it's occupying the street level itself. So because the tram tracks that run down the streets have been out of use for the last few years, and car traffic has also decreased significantly. So across the city of Rotterdam, part of the human transport infrastructure is being removed and turned into an extensive green infrastructure to encourage biodiversity. So Terra Weena is actually a collective urban farm. And as you'll see here again, some conflicts can arise within this urban farming commons community. But the article ends on a rather hopeful note and argues that that UBI, the implementation of UBI in the last 10 years have had overall some very positive effects. And that this small ecosystem of commons-oriented projects that have formed on this little corner of Weena is actually a very promising example of the kind of post-capitalist system that could shape our future cities. So I hope this little preview made you want to read the article. And yeah, this is it.
There was one thing that it made me think about. It's this idea that you imagine a sort of revolution, whether it goes violently and quick or that it goes gradually. It doesn't really. This enormous change in the power structure and the economy of our cities. It made me think about and the translation to the spatial effect. What I know about French cities is that when the revolution came, that there was this enormous expropriation of the power structures before the revolution, like churches and also, of course, palaces of the nobility. especially churches, with their cloisters, monasteries, etc. All these monastery grounds were freed up, and then they could be demolished, and this gave the possibility of introducing. All of a sudden, there was all this space in French cities that could be reinvented for something else. And here you have a little bit the same thing. Like before, we had our economy that is also based on strange gods and superstition, but then of the market. That these buildings are now empty and birds fly in and out of them, and then we have to reinvent them. So this whole idea of an enormous amount of space opening up in the city, opening up an enormous amount of space in our imagination. Like, what do we do with all these over-dimensioned roads and infrastructure in Rotterdam and all these over-dimensioned buildings? And that is, I think, the great effect of this story, that it opens up our imagination so much. And the interesting thing is, by describing it in such a way that things can go wrong and the people start infighting, etc. I won't try not to give it away either. Is that it adds realism. So it just makes you think that, wow, this could actually happen.
And also how you present it.
Yeah, so there was the idea with the form of the news article also to try and make it make this possible future more tangible, despite its utopian nature.
Also the kind of language that you use. I mean, it's so normal. You could actually imagine it to be part of the Groene or the Economist, or it's
also in combination with the graphical language, which is kind of really mainstream. I mean, like it's kind of in a sense convincing. It's how architects present their work. You know?
Except the collage of the donkey-headed.
Yeah. Okay.
It's also an eye-opener toward it makes you look at these buildings, these two buildings in a different way. It actually shows that is kind of strange architecture. So like this temple of care, right. The architecture evokes something like that, but it's actually the temple of corporate business. And Hoogstad, he would probably turn in his grave. I'm sorry.
Multi-lever.
The multi-lever, yeah. You're really
Paul
great at
Polman
finding
also.
titles. Yeah. All three of them have great titles, I think.
Thank you for this additional what-if.
Exactly. Yeah, it was of course inspired by all the assignments that we did throughout the course as well.
And there's plenty of space, so I would like to make a plea for the introduction of a school where people can learn from former communes and living groups and etc. So Arnold Reindorf is going to tell everybody how to do it right, and I'm going to give a lesson in how things can be disastrously done.
From personal experience?
Yes, of course.
Okay, well that's actually a good topic.
Yes,
back to the
Yeah.
Well.
No, but I think this endeavor is actually quite central to what we are trying to do here. Like, how do you think about the future without having any images of it, without having the stories attached to it? And this is something that I think as designers and as school we have put this task for us, to actually help people to imagine what could be. So I think this is doing a really good
But there's this,
job in that way.
in the technique of communication, there's something really interesting going on, I find, and that is that presenting something that is actually quite radical, very radical, because it really touches it, and it's also deeply embedded, because you kind of very discreetly you show like the theoretical foundations of your story, so it's all it's a kind of a real kind of radical change. but it's presented in a very matter-of-fact, dry way. And that is interesting because that is exactly the opposite, the perfect opposite of how architecture is being communicated, or real estate is being communicated right now. Right now, things that are absolutely banal and completely conventional and really stupid are being sold as if they are as if it's utopia, as if the heavens will open. Paradise is at our doorstep, and this has never been done before. It's being told every day, again, 10 times, etc. So this is the perfect opposite of conventional real estate. You know, like the buildings like the Martal and the Depot, they were presented like, you know, the future is here. We have arrived in the 22nd century. So that is, I think, but seriously, that is but it's a very difficult path to walk because it means you know, it's a very difficult storytelling thing. But I think you did it well. UBI.
Okay.
Well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take a break until, well, 3:30. Let's stick to the schedule. So then we have some time to relax and prepare for the next 3 presentations. Yeah. 3.
Laura.
Yeah, if you can disinfect it a little bit with spray, would be great.
I think the sound is good if it's in the middle range from the volume.
Okay, on this.
Yeah, it's just that it's not full because then it's super loud.
Okay.
Somewhere in middle to full.
Okay. I'll,
Nee, maar we hebben van de hele alles, de Tweede Kamer. Die gaan 150 Kamerleden. Ja, oh ja, dat wordt dan Pieter. Dat is net zoals hotels in Londen. Ik weet dat.
Herman had a Zoom call.
Okay, then can I already start?
Yeah. If the beamer is warm enough again. Okay, while the beamer is slowly starting up, well, I didn't want to say much, but just that we're going to continue with the last three presentations. First by Emilie Stecher. And floor is yours.
All right. Welcome to the second half of our presentations. And I would like to start it with the poem that you all see. In a Burning Sea by Breiten Breitenbach. How often were we trapped in coolness on the floor, the smell of turpentine and fire, the canvases white to our empty eyes, night's indifference, and the moon, a smile somewhere outside, out of sight, days decompose like seasons beyond the panes, leaves of rain, a face, a cloud, this poem. I wanted to leave my imprint on you, to brand you with the flaming hour of being alone. No fire sings as clear as the silver ashes of your movements and your melancholy body. I wanted to draw that sadness from you so that you might be revealed the way a city opens on a bright landscape filled with pigeons and the fire of trees, and silver crows also out of sight in the night, and the moon a mouth that one can ignite. And then I wished that you could laugh and your body bitter, my hands of porcelain on your hips, your breath such a dark, dark pain, a sword at my ear. How often were we here, where only silver shadows stir? Only through you I had to deny myself. Through you alone I knew I had no harbor in a burning sea. So, in the last month, we were telling a lot of stories. And through that, we tried to make the invisible visible. We were sensing the city, and by doing so, I was going a lot against my discomfort. We tried to see the stuff that's all around us, but no one notices. And we realized that we're in the midst of an apocalypse, and that there's a disconnection of nature and culture. But we also learned that sometimes it's best to not just do something, but sit there. Those and more words were flying around in my head at the end of this month. And to sort them, so I can see them in a more associative way, I created this huge mind map. It's a collection of all the courses, the lectures, my thoughts. I tried to write it down objectively, but it's not always possible. But yeah, it helped me to kind of sort my thoughts and make new connections that I would maybe not have seen without it. And also, it showed the complexity of the network of a city and its endless possibilities for connections. While I was looking for a theme, I found some reappearing topics. And one of them is disconnection and connection. We talked a lot about the dissociative disorder of the Rotterdam harbor, which is the disconnection of the harbor and the city. It's visible, but then there are also invisible things like the disconnection of nature and culture. Connections, we talked about the parochial or the overlapping parochial places that form the public, and the interconnectivity of the drug market that forms an underlying invisible network in the city. And also the connections of plants through fungi. So there were all kinds of things with connection and disconnection. And another one was time. So we started our course with a stroll through the city, and Christian explained to us his temporality, notion of temporality. And then we passed with Wouter, we dived into the past of the city and looked at all the parcellating tissues underlying there. And with Dirk and Herman, we went into the future and practiced cathedral thinking and went as far as imagining the end of human beings. So it were those two themes that guided me through the last weeks. And zooming in on the Anthropocene, I found this correlation or this interconnectivity between time and how we think of time, that we have to practice cathedral thinking in order to being a good ancestor and come past this post-growth mindset, so we can thrive in balance with nature again and land on Earth. And I was asking myself, what if our disconnection from nature is coming from our constant thriving for efficiency and growth? And what if this all started when we distorted time, when we regulated the international clock time? And instead of landing on Earth, like Bruno Latour said, we are drifting more and more apart. And especially in cities, this rush is unavoidable. And we can almost watch as we run through the apocalypse. And also, there are things that are out of this usual burning sea. They resist, but they are rare and they have to be found. And I wanted to capture this feeling of loneliness I sensed when thinking of them, of not belonging, wanting to belong, and of being out of the usual. There's a constant conflict going on between the hectic and the slowness, the doing nothing, which is usually perceived as something bad, and the doing everything fast and a lot, which is good. And in this fast city environment, the isolation of the slow gets stronger. And I was also looking at places of hope for these kinds of, for these feelings, for these moments. And in this last month, I also got more and more aware of the city as a conglomerate of my personal experiences. So my views have changed through the stories that I've heard and the stories that I told myself during this time. And I wanted to take this chance and add another layer to these stories. So that's why I chose to do a short film. And through connecting two things that are normally not connected, I wanted to add a new experience in the city and a new layer to the city's complexity. So let's see the film. Oh yeah. Does it work? Yeah. Maybe. A little bit louder.
I wanted to leave my imprint.
Louder.
To brag you with a flaming hour being alone. No fire sings as clear as the silver ashes of your movements and your melancholy body. I wanted to draw that sadness from you.
Should be here. I feel trapped a little, all through stuff. places because I'm been around it my whole life since I was little. That's probably right, but I don't want this life. I don't want a street life. I think in the future I want to help these people. It's my I think my calling, I'll help myself first, but I'm not helping myself that much. I don't know how it works, but I'm really friendly. Sometimes people take my kindness and weakness. I don't believe in bad or good, just like fine line, like positive and negative. You know, it's like really fine. It's like bad and good and love and hate. It's so close. If you're bad, it's for a good reason. That's what I say. I don't change the world, my daughters will, definitely. They've got brains and they haven't, you know, they haven't got their mum around. I've been here 18 months with my boyfriend and I was miserable, really miserable in the house. He's got a job, money, car, everything. And for the last 2 weeks I've been on the street and I've been more happy, nothing. I was supposed to go home yesterday, but I don't think I'm going to get very far with 3 euros. I'll be fine, I'll be fine. God's looking after me, I swear. I believe in God. Like, I want to feel grounded. I don't know. I want to fly as well. Be done, just up to the ground. I want to fly to the sky. I want to do everything, but too quickly I have to take a little baby steps at a time and not try and get to my goal. Not run before I can walk, you know? Basically, I've been stuck for too long now. It's going on really bad. But I want to just be creative. I love to write. I'm writing a book at the moment. It's going to be a bestseller. I didn't start writing it because there was no happy ending. But now I think I best start because there might be a happy ending. And there is always silver lining. People like to hear stories like abuse, but as long as you come out of it the other end. I said, please just talk to me, Mum. She doesn't talk very well.
Often where only silver shadows stir. Only through you I had to deny myself. Through you alone I knew I had no harbor in a burning sea.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I would also like to thank Jord, but he cannot be here today. But he was of great help and like followed me through the whole process and led me through it. Yeah.
Tell us about Christina.
Christine.
How did you find her?
Well, I was sitting at this tree and not just doing something, but just sitting there. And then I realized that some people have the same pace as I do. And it were the homeless. And if you go to the next picture, it's actually like this. It's just next to it, the Pauluskerk. And Christina was just there. And yeah, those were some other people that I met. That's Christina and Igor. And yeah, so she told me her whole story, kind of, how she came here and.
Did she tell it and then you said, can you tell it again and can I record it or how?
Well, I was already there with my camera. And then I started talking with them. And actually Igor was the one he asked me what I was doing, and I told them about the independent school, and he said like, yeah, if you have some challenge for me, I can make a story out of everything. And so I asked if I can film him, and then he told me a story, and I asked if he could tell a story about the tree, and he was going on about furniture and tree houses and everything. But and then I started talking with her, and she really had this need of telling, and I just always had my camera on. I never turned it off. So yeah, that's how I got the sound. So it's not second take or something.
Did you show her the movie already?
No, I didn't see her again. I also don't have a contact. And I guess she wanted to go home yesterday, so I guess
maybe she found some money.
Yeah. But she was always saying that her boyfriend that she was staying with, he would pay for the ticket home, but he was supposed to come yesterday.
But the first thing you said is interesting. You said that the only person who had the same pace as you were these guys. So the only people, so you have either, let's say, artists like you, and homeless people. Are the only ones, are they somehow on the same slow kind of observational?
And also sometimes the delivery guys, if they're waiting. And on Sundays, also people tend to go slower and linger somewhere.
So it's finding out who is lingering.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and also there's the homeless and the tree. They have so many things in common. Like they are both outside all the time. They watch the city, they sense the city, they are always there. Probably no one else knows it so well as them. Like, what is the real feeling of the city? How do people react on you? And then also with this tree, everyone is just passing by. No one really looks at it. Like the homeless. You notice them, but you just walk by. And I mean, I also have to admit I was sitting a lot on this bench on the opposite side and just like, how do I approach them? What do I do? How can I interact? I mean, I feel like I have nothing in common with them. Or what do I even ask? Because I left the question open. I didn't know in which direction I wanted to go with the film, so I also didn't really know how to ask them. And fortunately, sometimes I smoke cigarettes. So I had a cigarette, and I always went to the people and asked them for a lighter because they were smoking outside. So that was,
Yeah, and then I always had my cigarette that of course always went off again because I was talking.
You're really the only people who smoke.
Yeah, and it's really like when you spend some time there, you realize how people are really ignoring you. Like I've been standing there for hours and no one looks at you, and you're immediately in this zone. Like as soon as you're there, people don't see you anymore. And
I think the film leaves you with this emotion of loneliness and slowness in a very strong way. That's really the lingering idea of this other time zone. Both,
There was a really interesting article in, I think it was The Guardian, or some newspaper, and it was about the term languishing. And it said that this is a big thing, especially now during Corona, is that a lot of people, they aren't completely depressed or anything, but they're also not completely active as they were before Corona, but they're in this zone that they call languishing. So it's as if you're kind of, it feels a little bit like depression, but it isn't really, because it doesn't really affect your mood about yourself or anything, just that you feel very slow and you just observe the world going by a little bit, and so it's called languishing, as if, languishing also implies that you're waiting for something to happen, but you're not really doing anything about it, and it can go on and on and on forever. And also this film, it touched on, it reminded me of that state, that you can be in. And I think it also implies a kind of invisibility, that while you're languishing, people also kind of disappear from view.
Yeah. And you have all throughout the last 12 weeks, this element of time has been coming up with you all the time.
Yeah.
So, and also with notion of getting out of the rat race, taking the time that it takes, things like that. So I think it's a good choice for you to focus on this theme. It shows another layer of it, I think.
At the beginning of the movie, because you said trees and homes are alike, I thought that the tree was talking.
Yeah, I did too.
I was really wondering, because he was telling the story, so really.
Even with these daughters, I thought, oh yeah, that's of course the seeds of the tree will grow up.
And the roots maybe.
And then the tree started to write the best.
And the 3 euros also.
Yeah, the 3 euros.
But also this whole idea of connectivity or disconnectivity is also in a lot of ways coming back in this movie, right? It's like our disconnectivity with other people in the streets, while they are maybe extremely connected to the street, but we don't pay attention to them. And the same is with nature. It's completely disconnected with the trees, with nature. It's just, they're all just background images for us.
I think it's beautiful how the tree is kind of disconnected from us, but the tree is so connected to the place where it is. It's like one of the most connected people. And how you also with the homeless people, in a way they are both they are disconnected from us, but they are like the trees, like the opposite of the homeless, who doesn't have any place.
And also these scars on the tree, these remind you of this kind of this story of a woman clearly hurt and abused and kind of lots of scars on her, and then you see all these kind of lumps and scars on the trees. I thought, yeah, that worked very well.
Music as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's you.
Yeah.
Really touching. And what I found heartbreaking and very true was this sentence that she said. She basically said, I'm writing a book, a bestseller, etc. But that she said, she basically said that nobody's interested in your story except if you come out at the other side. So people have no time for sad stories except if there's a happy ending. thought that was that's so tragic in a way, that we only have a tolerance for unhappy stories if they end happily.
And you found out what the filmmaker's luck is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it happens to you when you make a film. It's luck coming to you in a way. It's asking for light or giving a light, and then it happens in a way. It's a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll continue with Siiri. Can you give the microphone to Siiri? Ewout, is het beter om het gordijn weer open te doen of maakt niet zoveel uit? Okay.
All right.
Floor is yours.
Yeah. I've had such an inspiring spring. Yeah, it's been amazing. And also, as Alexandra told, like after the 8 weeks of the course, I was like so overwhelmed, and all this new information and all our assignments and everything. I was like, I really need to have these 4 weeks of time for myself and to visualize my thoughts. So I made a comic book. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So this spring was also for me. I graduated my bachelor as from architecture last Christmas, and this spring was kind of, I don't know where I go, what happens, and well, then I'm here and everything like. I feel like I'm in a place where I have so many different directions I want to go, and now I wanted to look at myself and think a bit like what comes next and what to do. So with this project, I was asking, well, who am I doing this for? What I want to do? Well, I want to do it for myself and see what comes. So this book is about me looking in the mirror, and I'll try to be honest. So it's inspired by Dirk, your essay about the Anthropocene and waking up in the Anthropocene, traveling through it and looking at the theme with different philosophical views by Clive Hamilton. And I'm having your essay in the storyline, and also all the time reflecting about me in different ways of facing the era of humankind. Okay, so this is a sneak peek to your comic. I also printed it to you, so you can read it today in the bed, but it's a bit of spoiler, but I still spared some pages for you, so something new is also coming. Yeah, okay, so starting from denier, me as a denier. Well, with thinking about me as a denialist, I went through a bit of like this. First I was like, of course I'm not a denier, like I'm already like woke about some things. But then looking a bit closer, opening my arms, like, oh, I'm only a denier, like everything is denialist in me. I was like totally down there, like what could not be denialist in my life? Like, I have everything in my life. I have all the possibilities in the world. I can do whatever I want. I can be awake if I want, but I can also go to my comfortable bubble and close everything down. So I can really kind of decide, and it's like I'm used to maximal comfort. It's maybe a fun thing from this spring in here. Like, I was so annoyed in my apartment when my roommate didn't want to have the heater on. And it's like, my book is not about maybe like really the consumer choices I'm doing, but I think it's very nice way to realize that this small thing about taking me out of my comfort zone, it's a bit cold in my apartment. I'm annoyed. It's so annoying. So, yeah, there's a denial in all of us, and that's maybe also what I was inspired by the essay that when, you said that there's a denier in all of us, but I believe that there is also a post-humanist in all of us, and that's how I decided to reflect on myself and see, is it true? Yeah. So, well, I was doing my denialist observation of me, and well, I went down that I'm totally a denialist, but then, like, what I like drawing as a tool of self-reflection is that I really have to visualize everything, so I can't leave it a bit like unclear, like because like yeah, it has to be very concrete, otherwise I can't draw it. So I try to draw my denialist part after realizing I'm totally a denialist, and it was quite hard. I draw an avocado or cut flowers. It's like, yeah, a bit denialist, but maybe, I thought I need to move forward and face the denialist wall. Well, what comes next? The greenwashed near me. So this is what I found interesting. In the moving towards the eco-modernist part, which I feel is a lot of about building your imago. It's like after facing this denialist wall and facing you have to do something, I start greenwashing me a lot, yeah. And it's kind of, I feel like I have like totally vegan, ego, hipster, art student aura in me, which allows a lot of things. It's like, I think people already might think that I'm quite green, so then I can do things for the sake of doing, because no one asks more, no one checks if it's actually green, if it's actually good for a planet, because I already greenwashed myself by doing a summer trip and by land and posting a lot of it in Instagram and doing a lot of green designs with flowers. But then at the end, like, well, I can also, on the second day, fly to California and not post so much. And it's totally about building an imago. So at the end, I think I need to take the angel wings out and move forward and see if there is another way of approaching this. So moving towards post-humanism. I think this was a very beautiful line on the essay. The environmental crisis has its origin in a spiritual crisis. And I feel that post-humanism is maybe the part where it's starting to, it's like the place to learn how to stop lying and how to maybe find different meanings which are maybe not in consuming, about building something around me, but it's more about building something around the nature and your surrounding and opening your eyes. So yeah, I try to see what I see as a post-humanist in me. Well, here I'm picking nettles in Rotterdam straight after the snow melted and making nettle pesto for me. But also what I found interesting was, because I had my being a vegan as an eco-modernist and it's and as a greenwashing part of myself, which maybe was at first. And I think it's for many people, being vegan might be first because of the environment, because of making yourself green, maybe. But then after stepping out of the system, like before I ate animal products, I didn't really think I would ever stop because of animals. I didn't find the emotion to it. But after not using it, it was possible for me to see the harm because I was not in the system anymore. I didn't need to lie for myself or close my eyes for it because I wasn't blaming myself in a way. So that's why I think it goes to the whole posthumanism part that kind of after you're in the same level, you can open your eyes to it and kind of see the whole part. Yeah, I also had this cute thing. We always, with my, I have this singing group, and we always have this Christmas concert for plants in a winter garden in Helsinki. So we always sing one songs for. Yeah, it's so funny. It's this huge greenhouse where it's this nice small balcony. And we also invite our friends, but only 10 of the first ones can see us, and we can see them, and other ones are the plants. Maybe some friends are behind the plants. So I think that's also something posthumanist. But yeah, there's also a warning in posthumanism. Well, first of all, it's the less positive portrait of man, maybe even self-hate for humankind, like looking yourself really in the mirror and being like, okay, this can't continue like this. But also what is important to realize that it can be diminishing our influence on the planet. So we shouldn't still hide our responsibility, because when we are putting ourselves in the same level of the other species, it's not true in our world, because we have so much power in here. It's not. We also have to have the responsibility to take care of that. So I see that this is an important phase you have to go through, but maybe not the place you'll need to land at the end.
What's this world's first fish doorbell?
Oh yeah, it was an inspiration I needed to put there, because in Utrecht they just made this doorbell for fish, which is like in the canal. There is a button which fish learn to push, and then they get through this canal and to another place. So it's like we could also design for the animals and take them account. Yeah, I just wanted to have it there. Okay, well then we move towards Anthropocentrism 2.0 and to the unescapable responsibility of the man, which is on the center of the stage. Something has to be done, and how to start become a healer. And this was the same thing happened as with the denialist part. First, I didn't have that last page because I was sure I'm not an anthropocentrist 2.0. Then Michelle read my comic and was like, you have to start looking a bit closer, maybe you are. And then, well, I think I like this picture the most, and after thinking about it, I think I had like such an anthropocentrist 2.0 week. But it was hard. But it was very hard to see this part in me as well. Yeah, so here I have my quarantine garden, which I was doing, and maybe some future plans, which I want to do later. And also me looking for a bike to Finland. It's still a plan I love to tell about, but I'm having it on next week to figure out if it's really possible or not. Okay, so then I'm again a bit overwhelmed by everything, and well, having the first reaction of I start painting my denialist part out, but it's not how it works. So yeah, I still have all of this in me, and I don't want this book won't take it out, because it's like now I try to open it and also want to realize that it's like, yeah, well, I have them all, and it's so easy to kind of try to push something out, but then I feel if I would want to paint it out, I close my eyes again, and that's not what I want. But what happens after the book? Well, first of all, I think it's very easy to, it's not easy to break the bubble, and it's easy to talk about it in here and then forget it again and go to the bubble again and forget everything. So to move forward, something really needs to change, and it's really this cluster, which is, it's not easy. Like maybe stepping out of the comfortable bubble must be the opposite of comfort. It's painful, and it's about letting go and like really doing something differently. And that's the question, what happens? But I think maybe in my position, I'm like lucky still to be a student. I don't actually need to earn quite a lot of money right now, because we have great system in Finland, and also doing things beside studies. It's kind of having a freedom of choosing what to do. But of course, I'm also aware that the things I'm doing now, when I have that freedom, it's affecting where I go and where I'll end up after the freedom is ended and I have the things I've been doing with the freedom. So I think with everything, I feel I have the responsibility that I have to be critical for the work I do, and I have to reflect the work in here. I was also thinking about it might be fun to put my portfolio in this one. Like start doing my portfolio so that I think I can place works in different parts, and then maybe when I have a new project, I know where I'll put it, and then I can see, am I going towards the place I want, or am I not? And should I do it or should I not? And as right now, I should have the freedom that if I feel I shouldn't do it, I shouldn't do it. Maybe. But it's still not so easy. I'm still in the comfortable bubble. Yeah. Okay, so this was observation from my perspective, and I think it's nice to do it now, and I know if I do it in 5 years, or if I would do it before, like 5 years ago, it would be totally different. If someone else does it, it's totally different, but maybe that's the beauty also about it, that it's me right now. Yeah. That's it.
So you're looking for a bike?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I think so.
I just checked, it's 2,000 kilometers, right?
I know. But I have free May.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually my summer holiday starts tomorrow, so that's fair. Yeah. I want to give you the book.
Yes. Yeah. We're ready.
Here you are. Here you are. Here you go. Here you are. Here you go.
And you were so brutally honest, Siiri.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I'll still have you in my... Oh, what? Yeah, I have. I'll get you one more. And you already got one. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yay!
Yes. Wow.
It's really a
Yes,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
First edition.
I can only hope for, let's say, the musical version.
Yeah, oh sure.
Typology after this fantastic.
Thank you.
And I think it shows some, let's say, deep understanding in the sense that you have a very to-the-point observation that there's not only a denialist in every one of us, but also a postmodernist, also a modernist, also, etc., etc. And that is indeed the problem of these four sides striding with each other, not only in your head, but also you can point it out in society. And I think the deep understanding is that there is no one only best solution in this. You have to do it by discussing and trying to, let's say, stumble forward intelligently in a way. So I think your comic, you call it a comic, is really quite serious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I was wondering about one thing. You say, I'm just wondering about your view on this. You're saying that there's this criticism of this, attitude of saying scientists will take care of the rest, right?
Yeah.
That's the critique, more or less, of the eco-modernist me. Or you say that I'm just hiding behind actions by others, being the scientists. But how do you see? Because in the other parts, the post-humanist me, the anthropocentrist me, you all of the time you talk about your own responsibility, and that's also what makes it such an honest and such a painful sometimes experience, of course. But if you would say, well, I'm taking part, or I will vote for a Green Party, for example, or I will support collective actions on this and that level. Do you see that as part of hiding behind the group, or as real action? Because in your own positive contributions, you don't really talk about politics or economy, or so. How do you see that level?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to answer. Maybe like. I don't know what I think about criticizing the eco-modernist part. It's like, it's hard because there you already do something, but then it can hide something behind it. So it's sometimes it is very good, but then some, like, it's hard to say when you are hiding and when you are, that's the most thing you can do. Because is the other option you don't vote at all and someone votes the denialist party, or?
Yeah. No, but there's, I mean, you're really hard with your, you're really tough with yourself, because there's so many other things that you could hide behind.
Yeah.
You know, you could be so much easier on yourself. For example, what I realized, or I read somewhere recently, is that the absolute most polluting thing you can do as a person, which really you can go on 3 holidays every year better than doing that. It's having a child.
Yeah.
You know, having a child is absolutely, you know. So if you don't have a child,
can you travel?
you can go, you can eat meat
More
all
than
day,
5
fly on a plane while you eat meat. You know, it's. So there's all these, but you don't go there. You don't go into, you don't give yourself any breaks.
Yeah, but that's why, because I was doing it for myself, why should I give some breaks if I want to see myself in a mirror also?
Okay.
But I also had my Charles in the comics.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's what makes it so entertaining also.
Yeah.
This is, it is a funny story about your life, but at the same time, yeah, it's completely recognizable for all of us.
Yeah, that was my idea. Like, I'm doing a self-reflection, but I'm quite general. So I think maybe someone else can also reflect through it. And I maybe help it a bit so that you can, I think after like saying something out loud, okay, well, this is my guilty pleasure, I do it sometimes, then you can come with me and, okay, I do it as well. So then it's like, maybe it's helping someone else as well.
You also, like you were just saying, like maybe I can use the 4 different quadrants or ways of looking at the world as a way to also organize my projects or to decide whether I'll take projects or not. In the essay, you don't really refer to you as an architect, right? It's much more to you as a human being and as a person, but not per se professionally. Was that on purpose?
True. Yeah, maybe I would have some small things there, but I wanted to keep it quite personal, and also I feel like I don't have that many projects, and they are still a bit random. So I think, well, maybe if I do it up in 5 years, I can see how my work goes in there. Yeah.
It's a good idea every 5 years to make
a new comic. Yeah,
that's about your life.
Oh, I love that. Okay, let's meet here 5 years. Yeah.
We make that the Scouts promise.
Yeah.
But the building has to be still here.
Yeah.
Oh, it will be.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then in 5 years.
I hope we will be.
That's a big if.
We'll take our bikes and come and see you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Or meet halfway.
It's fair enough. Copenhagen is.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Then we'll move to the last one, which is Laura. Siiri, can you give your microphone to Laura?
Was someone sitting here?
No. Herman.
Yeah.
Heb je de clicker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's wait for Dirk.
Yes. But then we stop.
And then we don't wait. We're still on time, on schedule. So.
Yeah, it went quite good.
Yeah?
I was expecting everyone to take a bit more time, but well managed. So now I have to...
Yeah, no, you cannot take too long.
I remember doing these, as they call them, crits at the Berlage Institute here, when they were still in Rotterdam. And these were, after 2 presentations, we were already an hour late. Horrible.
Yeah, that's how it mainly goes.
What's the guy's name?
Oh my God.
Okay, since Dirk is back.
Yes, good afternoon everyone. It was so nice to see all your presentations because I also didn't see the end results yet, so I'm the last. And I have developed a pocket guide to getting lost in the last 4 weeks. Well, I will start with this quote because it captures very well the basic or the main content of this pocket guide. It's a quote of Walter Benjamin, of which both Mike, Michelle and Wouter reminded me individually. So the quote is, "Not to find one's way around in a city does not mean much, but to lose one's way in a city as one loses one's way in a forest requires some schooling." So that's what I want to do with this pocket guide. So this pocket guide contains 2 layers in which also both my position, my double position here at the independent school as a student, but also as a teacher at the University of Antwerp. I've also been studying this topic, so it brings these 2 positions together. And this pocket guide is addressed to anyone who wants to study the city and wants to collect qualitative data about a certain district or neighborhood. And yeah, what you can do by getting lost is getting an experience of daily life of that district or neighborhood. So the first layer or the under layer are 3 walks I developed, or 3 drifts as you can call them, in 3 post-war urban quarters in Rotterdam, in Pendrecht, 110 Morgen and Lombardije. And then the second layer, which comes on top of it, but with which I will start, is a sort of layer of practical guidelines on how to get lost. And I think the basic principle is that anyone can get lost, but you just have to become receptive to opening up to gather this information that you can find just around you. So in these guidelines I have developed by reading some theories, for example, Alan Jacobs, Jane Jacobs and Jan Gehl. They also developed from out of these 3 walks, but also from the walks that students have been doing in Antwerp in the 20th century belt of Antwerp. And maybe one last thing is that, so I did the 3 walks I did in Rotterdam were in post-war urban quarters, these typical areas that are not developed to get lost in, according to the post-war and especially modern urban planning. So these are the first 2 guidelines. So the first is accept that the journey is the destination. So what I mainly do is I choose a strategic starting point, a point which you will expect to take an important role in for the neighborhood, and then you have to get lost. So to optimize the experience between you and the surrounding, I also suggest to do the walks solo. And then I think it's very important to also communicate to your audience on like a possible walking companion, but also the temperature, the day and time you've been doing your walks. The second is walking distance is a relative notion. So Jan Gehl says in his books that most people are willing to walk 500 meters to reach a daily amenity, but of course it's dependent on the type of person and on the role you're taking at that moment. Like if you're carrying shopping bags, it's not the same for elderly people, of course. So my advice is also to at least try to spread out with a radius of 500 meters from your starting point, and mainly it ends up in walks of 1 to 3 hours. The third is a very obvious one, but we might forget about it still. It is walking is a sensory experience, so it's not only looking, but also listening, smelling, wondering, feeling. And that way you can start to detect change. So you can start imagining who lives in that area, who used to live there. You can wonder how a place has become to what it is today, but also what it could become. You can also ask yourself how determining the physical site of the district, of the neighborhood is for the way people organize their lives in it. Then the fourth is also kind of obvious, actually they all are, but walking is a first-hand experience, and that's exactly why it stands out from other methods for qualitative research. So compared to being told or reading about a certain area, it is very different and much more powerful to walk in it yourself, because it helps to recall places, but also to already start imagining this desired change. So you can identify changes earlier than when you read about it in a second-hand experience. Then, of course, walking is subjective, and that's also why for a long time in research they weren't taking this method serious. Maybe today that's still the case, but I suggest to embrace this. Because by walking, like your own background experiences, prior knowledge, values and expectation will influence the walk, and you should take full advantage of it. Which kind of role do you want to adapt to when you start walking? Because it can determine your walks. It is also important to communicate on it with your audience. For example, the drawings that you see on top of the text are already giving some hints of the walks I did myself. So, for example, I communicated on my own feeling of discomfort and belonging in the walks. And then, because walking is so subjective, if possible, I think it could be interesting to have the same district or neighborhood walked more than once by different individual walkers, researchers. Then the second, by walking and by observing, you will always see and hear and smell and everything, all these sensory things, more than you can process. So, because also walking entails, or getting lost entails, a certain slowness. You don't have to know your focus beforehand, it will develop gradually. And it also doesn't have to be the same for each walk. So compare, repeat, create sequences, zoom in, zoom out, look for patterns, and then eventually kill your darlings. Yeah, I also implemented some theories in it. One of it is the imaginability of a neighborhood or district. So it communicates on how easily you can recall the place, like a mental image of the place. It is, of course, a notion Kevin Lynch came up with, and he links it directly to direct indicators, like the physical perceptible objects of the built environment, but I have also added to this the indirect indicators, such as human-human interaction and human-environment interaction. So this all plays a role in how imaginable this district is. Then the 8th is forget about top-down. Of course, architects and urbanists don't like to hear this one. But at least during your walk, you should forget about this because we're so used to looking on our phones and on maps, Google Maps the whole time. But I suggest to not do this during your walk. And especially like embrace the fact that you can only communicate on what you see around you. And this method is not intended to give you an overview of the district as a whole, but rather to communicate on what you can see in your surrounding. Yeah, also because you will complete by walking, and that makes it different than just observing. You will complete a journey, and by this you can make a mental map of successive situations. So it's not just one situation, but a series, a storyboard of situations. And then the 9th is create your own language. So I think it's very important to know how you want to communicate to your audience about what you've experienced during these walks, either in words, visual, or in an auditory language. So unlike the raw material you will probably produce during and right after your walk. The visualizations as a communication method should be structured, critical, and nuanced, and also accept that reflection takes time. And then the 10, the one to end with, but maybe even the most important one, is stay amazed. The power of walking is in the repetition and in the experience, so you should all the time stay attentive to the everyday and apparent trivialities. I used one of the drawings from my own walks here because it states it very well. I saw at a certain point a woman with her daughter, and she saw that there was a female site manager, and they were so surprised by the fact that she was female that they went up to her to congratulate her on this fact, but also to the mother asked whether this woman could explain to her daughter what she was actually doing. And they were in the face of a foundation. So I heard the site manager explaining to the kid in a very easy language what a foundation was. So these kind of everyday lives might seem trivial, but it's important to keep attention to it, because this is the way we can, as the title of this workshop also is called, like, in this way walking has a power to make the invisible visible. So I will go to the next part, the second layer. So I did 3 walks, and I gave all 3 a title. So the first is to 110 Morje, and I called it A Place of One's Own. So this is the drawing of my journey in 110 Morje. At first I thought, because it was snowing when I did this walk, so it was a bit shorter than I would normally walk. So I was a bit worried about this one, but then once I started drawing, I actually like now this drawing the most, because I think it shows the most, it has the most architectural expression in it. I think here I drew a lot of facades because I had the feeling like this area especially developed with attached single family houses and low apartment blocks. And you could really see everywhere like that people were looking for their own identity to express their own house within the row. Maybe also the legend. So I gave the imaginability here a 3 because according to what I was expecting at the beginning, I didn't really know how this area would work. So as you can see, I marked it in red. So this is the way that I communicate on my discomfort or my feeling of belonging. So at first I felt a bit discomfortable, but then once I started walking, for me it was actually very easy to navigate, so I gave the imageability a 3 out of 3. Then there are 2 other things that I marked. It's when I slow down, the line becomes dotted. And then I use this pattern with stripes to mark when I went what I called off-road, like all the ungoogleable parts of my walk. So when I entered a semi-public path or a private domain or in the middle of a park, all things you cannot see on Street View. And what is nice is that I also mainly slowed down at the points where I was getting off-road. There are some pictures coupled to it. I made some printouts of the booklets, so you can check it later. So the first is one of these semi-public paths. I also make sections of it to show the relationship between the front and the back of the houses that are attributed to these paths. So here you had this double situation in which you had at the one side the front, so people want to welcome you, and at the other side you had the back, so the backyard facing it, and people really tried to close it off. Then the image on the right side, I found a really nice one. You had this whole strip of an attached single family houses, and all of them looked exactly the same except for this first one. It was covered with flowers and welcome signs and like this dolphin that's making noise in the wind and all these little things to express that they were different. This is another example of an apartment block where people also try to communicate on what they saw as the boundary between public and private. So I really like this idea of the gate. It's like from this point on you enter my private domain and it's no longer public. All these little expressions like be aware of the dog, and this is also a bit the same with a more recent development where people started using the front yards to also express themselves, as in the picture on the right, like they showed a part of their private sphere to the public, but also they start filling it up with benches and flower pots. It almost looked as if they were trying to open up for a conversation to happen in their front yard. So it's like a sort of transitional space between the private and the public. So the second walk was in Lombardije. I called it the quality of informal paths, because here I entered so many semi-public paths. It was like a whole network of these paths. But that also made that for me the imageability of this district or neighborhood was a bit lower because I couldn't really orientate too good. I couldn't really recall it because I was doing all these paths and I didn't really know how they were following each other up. So this is one example of it. And I saw two things that made me think. Like first, I saw this trash, but it's like this shooters from children. So you could really see, like here, the situation is different because you have a back facing a back, which makes it more enclosed and for children to do the things that they can't do at home. But then on the other hand, I also saw a neighbor bringing something to another neighbor, or like a resident, a local bringing something to a neighbor, using this semi-public path. And she was really like on the soft shoes, so you could really read the situation, like she was bringing from back door to back door, an informal. This is another example of an edge where I could really see the urban tissue changing from this large-scale housing blocks to very large single-family houses along an approach road. And then this, I think, was my favorite space. Like at first I didn't dare to enter because there was also this man who was shouting something which I couldn't understand. So I thought he was shouting at me, but it turned out to be at a neighbor. So I didn't dare to pass, but then I did eventually. And at first I felt a bit uncomfortable because it was all like blind walls facing me. But then I entered up in this, what I call the hidden community, and you had all these small houses with their own identity, their own attributes, their own way to also border the private from the public, and with in the center this playground, which was founded by Opzomer. Yeah, and then this is also a situation in which you had two large-scale apartment blocks facing each other, the one with the back and as a parking lot, and then the other with the front as a park. So when you were sitting in the green area, you were just looking at the cars at the other side. So then the third is, I called it a city within the city. It was in Pendrecht. So for me it worked most as an independent area, which might also have to do with the fact that I started at Plein 1953, which is a large shopping area, and it was very, very crowded. I felt super uncomfortable. I had the feeling that everyone knew each other there, and you had like an elderly community, a lot of young people hanging around, and it really felt like this area where I didn't belong. But then I started walking and I entered these, again, nice spots. Here I also found it funny that like I entered this spot and you had this sign saying that it was only for authorized people, but then on the other hand, like the back door was saying welcome, so you had this double position, like people were still using it as an entrance to their homes. Yeah, more of these situations, of course, again, a back facing a front, and here the difference is that they don't have a front yard, but the semi-public pot becomes the front yard, as you can also see in the expression that it's wider. And then the last two pictures, the first, the one on the left, I experienced it as an edge. So again, I at first didn't want to pass, but then I did, and behind this building was a school, and was this whole new area waiting for me. And then at the end, I found this really nice area where you had a lot of green and well-kept neighborhood squares with these fixed ping pong tables in the middle, which gave a sense of belonging, a sense of togetherness. So one last thing, because I have the feeling that I've been talking for a long time. So yeah, what's next? Yeah, I had a discussion about this with Michelle, and yeah, at first I also wrote this as a guideline, but then I realized that it's not really a guideline, but maybe more a perspective for me. So I can consider this pocket guide to getting lost as a volume A or volume 1, and hopefully one day there will be a volume 2, which I think you can only get lost once, and then after you got lost, you can of course return to do more observation of specific spots or situations. But then ideally, I think because it's so subjective, it would be good if more than one person does this getting lost in the same area. And then when you've done this, what I'm doing with the students in Antwerp, then my open question is, would it be possible to also develop a sort of pattern language starting from these walks? So to bring it to the next level, can we define such patterns of post-war urban quarters? So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the end, you talk about problems and solutions, right?
Problems and solutions. You mean here?
See, a pattern describes a problem that...
Yeah, a pattern describes a problem that occurs over and over again, and then the core of a solution to that problem.
But the interesting thing about your walks and the getting lost is you kind of subvert that whole logic of problem and solution, don't you? Because you normally for the classic conventional morality or ethics of an urban planner is that if you get lost somewhere, that's not good. Getting lost is what you need to avoid. If you can get lost somewhere, then the planner has not done his job. So you subvert that. So and you not only subvert it, you even the problem that you propose. It's my interpretation, of course, is it's hard to get lost. And here is a solution for you, a number of tools that you might use, and then you can get lost. So is that also, if you would turn that into an operative sense for the area, that you want to make, is there an idea of taking it to the next step, that you would do certain things to certain neighborhoods in order for us to get lost there?
No, that's not, or I didn't see it that way. I think it's a method to read a certain neighborhood, and it's not intended to do something about the fact that you can lost in this area or about this imaginability. But what would be my next question is, okay, but then can we abstract or extract information from your observations? Can we abstract more general information from that?
And that is a little bit paradoxical, because you have to walk solo. That's your second law of walking, I think, and I think that's very true. And I was wondering, you know the work of Helen von Seken?
No.
So, I visited a congress called Let's Walk Urban Landscapes. It was about the thesis of a German guy who really also used walking as a research modus. And it was a very strange congress, because this way of walking, he said, well, you have to walk at least for 4 hours. Because after 4 hours, or for some people 5 hours, and for me, after 6 hours, something happens. Something happens with your the way you experience things. You have to be well, not on the brink of exhaustion, but well, one stage before that, and that's where you are most observative. And well, they let the whole Congress, there were 127 people there, walk for 4 hours. So I walked around an enormous Volkswagen factory in the neighborhood somewhere. Everybody had to do this 4 or 5 hours walking, but it was, I struggled a bit, but it was really impressive that a long walk, and you can do that in an urban landscape, or also I think, how long?
Yeah, that was my whole point, because I was a bit scared, because I made this whole plan, and then 2 weeks ago it was snowing the whole week, so I was a bit worried that nothing would come out of it, so I went walking when it was 2 degrees. So I think this was only 1 hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought that's way too short to say something about it, but then I started analyzing it, and I think the value is more in taking the time of analyzing what you experienced, and also, I mean, you have to be concentrated from starting point to end point. Here also what I saw as a problem first was that I couldn't write anything down because it was snowing. So, but I immediately, when I returned home, I started putting down everything in schemes and in words, what I've experienced.
And your legend is really beautiful and very to the point. Slow, accelerating, off-road, on-road, discomfort, belonging. I think everybody could make notes like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a bit the whole point. I think anyone can do this, but you just have to know where to focus on, or also reflect on where you would like to focus on.
Did you draw the maps right after that you made walk, or?
I made a draft version. Yeah.
While you were walking, or
no, afterwards, because I really literally got lost, so I didn't know what I was walking, or I didn't know my own journey.
All three were made in post-war neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
So what I find interesting is that if you look at them, at the shapes of your maps, you cannot deduce the urban planning beneath them. And I'm sure that if you would have done this in a 19th century neighborhood, etc., you would have. I think that you would have. So there's a kind of, I think, post-war neighborhoods give the possibility for, if you do it very well, as you have done, that you kind of you can kind of forget about the urban planning area because of the generosity probably of the open spaces that you can cross in whatever way you want. So you don't, you kind of transcend the planning. And I think that's a really interesting, that's also a kind of another way of showing that you have indeed gotten lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember here, because you see the edge at the left side and at the right side. And I remember here that I was literally getting bored. And then I decided to cross the edge again, because then I knew there was this whole new area coming up for me. So sometimes you are aware of the fact where you're walking, and you do have an image in your mind of how the area works, how the buildings are structured.
But that's where this rule, like avoid the top-down, comes in, right? If you want to avoid that, you want to stay away from the conditioning by the urban planning.
Yeah, but I mean, like the edge, you experience it. So I only drew here what I could see happening around me.
What we were talking about before, when you were still working on this, was what is this method for walking actually geared to? What is its goal, and who are you aiming to use it? And then we talked about urban designers, architects, planners, people, urbanists working in this area. And now, since you added this phase 2 and this pattern language, which I do think is interesting, especially because, as we already talked about this, but Mr. Alexander is not concerned with post-war neighborhoods at all, because he doesn't seem to see the kind of exceptions that you can find in this kind of urban environments. But if you talk about noting problems that you can find solutions for, maybe you could add one element to the agenda, which is places that are strikingly well, positive, beautiful, or attractive, and places that are exactly the opposite, causing, well, find a definition for problem. So that are awful or that obviously lack something, or so that you can also use this drawing to sort of identify the problems to take with you to the next phase.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe I should have made the distinction between the discomfort and belonging that was coming from other factors and discomfort and belonging that was coming from the space in itself. That's true, because now I put it all in one.
And in that sense, I also find it super interesting that you're not drawing conclusions, right? It's almost everything is either how you feel or what you see.
Yeah.
But you don't kind of take a step further and saying like, okay, this is bad, or this is per se good, or like this back to back or back to front houses. It does something with you, but you don't really say if it's a real positive or a negative experience.
Yeah, I see this as a sort of workshop where I try to explore this method and try to get to know more about this method. But in order to be able to do that, I think that more than one person should get lost. And also, I don't see walking as a research method as a method on itself, but always as a method next to other methods. And of course, since I had 4 weeks, I tried to focus on also enjoying being a participant and trying something out myself. But we talked about that, and then we also said, like, there's no point to make conclusions now because your whole theory is that you have to do more.
But what I find very strong about that is that it's a tool that is actually accessible and can be used by everyone that kind of wants to engage with the city. Everybody, like sociologists can use it, the urban planner can do this, a policy maker can do this, because you don't really need professional experience per se. You just write down what you see and feel and how the environment, what the environment does to you.
Yeah,
that makes it, I think, extremely...
For yourself, yes, but these maps are really well drawn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. But, I mean, they're not per se only, they're not limited to urban planners.
No.
They can be drawn by everyone that engages with the city. And afterwards you can have a good conversation about, okay, what does it mean? And you can start analyzing areas, etc. So
yeah, also I don't see this as the way to do it. It's more meant as, hey, here's the way I did it, but it's just one possibility. So everyone will do it in a different
I think we got to this point because you were asked to give a lecture on this, right? And then people will invite you immediately ask, like, so what is it? What good is it?
Yeah.
What do you use it for? And then, well, it could also be a range of answers. For instance, if you get lost, that is already successful. Or to get inspiration, to see it in this area in a different way than top down. Well, you can give all these kind of answers, but this is the question that they will ask you.
Yeah, but it should also be a sort of meditation.
Yeah.
And use.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. And he meditates best who meditates alone. And that's also true with walking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think for me this was also an exercise in visual communication. Like, there's no point to go walking if you want to do it as a research method, if you don't know how to communicate on it.
There was this one part that I found really funny, and it is where you really do the opposite of what the young Gales and the Christopher Alexanders and do, and that is because Jan Gale, Christopher Alexander, it's part of a tradition where there is a kind of a strong morality, and it's a pedestrian morality, it's about public spaces, civic use of these spaces. So that clearly in their view, a place where lots of people would gather would be a good place, would be an attractive place, would be a place that would... And you come in Pendrecht, and you come in this place and you see lots of people gathering, having a good time, and then you say, I don't like it here. This is giving me discomfort.
Yeah, it was a bit overwhelming.
But is that Corona reality?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because of course Corona could play a role in that. On the other hand, it also thought, well, this is interesting because this really is subjective. And it really is about one person, about getting lost. And if getting lost is something you do on your own. And you don't necessarily feel good if you walk into a shopping mall and there's loads of people there. So there's something antisocial in it, but which I really do.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
No, because lots of this whole, even the Kevin Lynch's and this whole tradition that you are part of is about public intervention and public planning, etc. But there's this, and that's why there's this other side to this project, and it's more the situationist, surrealist movement root of it. And that is, of course, the opposite. That is not at all about morality or ethics. That is about the subjective experience. So I'm happy that both of those dimensions are in it.
Do you think you will use this with your students next time?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, they are already working on this. They also presented on their results this week. So I was so surprised to see how everyone took a completely different method. There was someone who only worked with sounds, and he made soundscapes to show his journey. So it was so different, and that's also what I like, that you have these guidelines which are sort of practical and sort of restricting some things, but they don't tell you something about how you should do it or where you should focus on. And so I am already using it, but yeah, the next step is still a bit open.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since this is a school, you cannot wrap up a course without a diploma, right? First of all, I really want to thank you all for your wonderful presentations. I think also when Emilie was explaining what we've all been doing the last couple of weeks, I think also for us it has been an amazing experience to.
Good that you reminded.
Yeah, no, but so much,
yeah.
So much. But an amazing experience also because for us it's the first time, and I kind of feel humbled that you also wanted to help us in this first time course. You know, that you subscribed for something that completely didn't prove itself yet. You just dived into the deep, and I think well, I'm very happy that you joined us, and what came out of it is really amazing. So thank you all so much for your work. This is not completely the end. We will still see each other tomorrow, but we asked our graphic designers of Team Thursday to print some spectacular certificates, which I of course want to give to you.
That will open all the doors.
Exactly. Just hang behind your desk. They're still a bit, how do you say it? Like wet. Well, yeah, they'll dry in. they need a couple of weeks to really get it right. Please. This one is for you. For Laura. You're welcome. And for Alexandra. Congratulations also.
You all passed.
Yeah, you all passed. The grades will follow. We'll tell them to your parents.
It's also, it's a bit darker.
Well, let's not talk like this anymore. Let's have drinks. Continue the conversation there. Thank you.